Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's time to settle in and listen to something that changed my life forever. A story about deception, about the people closest to you turning your pain into their platform. The events I'm about to share took place in the beautiful city of Denver, Colorado, where I thought I was safe. My name is Sophia, and I'm 27 years old. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Last month, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. I discovered my sister had created a brand new Instagram account just to post one video, a single, carefully edited video about me. But it wasn't some shaky phone recording that someone shot by accident. It was produced. It had the polish of a reality television show. Sad piano music underneath, dramatic quick cuts between scenes, captions appearing on the screen with cruel messages. The freeloader finally gets kicked out. I watched it and my hands started shaking. The video opens with my mother sitting on our family couch, looking directly at the camera with tears in her eyes, though I would later wonder how many takes that had taken. And she says in this voice full of theatrical sadness, "I gave her everything, and she gave me nothing in return." The camera cuts to my dad in the driveway, throwing boxes and bags into the street like they're garbage, like I'm garbage. My sister is behind the camera, narrating in this perfectly modulated voice about tough love, about setting boundaries with adult children who refuse to grow up. And then she laughs. She actually laughs and says the freeloader is finally gone, before asking people to share the video if they relate to having a lazy adult child living off them. By the time I saw it, the video had already reached hundreds of thousands of views. I'm sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Denver, and I'm watching strangers, actual strangers whose lives I've never touched, calling me lazy, calling me entitled, saying I'm exactly the kind of person who needed a reality check, saying I probably deserved worse. My coffee got cold while I watched video after video. I watched it all the way through once, then I watched it again with the sound off, just staring at my parents' faces, trying to figure out where the people I grew up with had gone. That night, I did something that would change everything. I saved that video. I downloaded it. I uploaded a copy to my cloud storage. I sent it to my work email with the date and timestamp. I made sure I had evidence. 1 week later, my family discovered what I had done with those files. That was the day everything exploded. That was the day the real screaming started. If you're thinking that maybe there was a good reason for my family to post that video, that maybe I was actually living off them, let me tell you who I really am before you judge me alongside the thousands of strangers who already have. When people online called me a freeloader, they didn't know the real story. They didn't know that I had moved out of my parents' house for the first time when I was just 22 years old, right after I finished college. I got myself a tiny studio apartment near the train line. It was barely bigger than a shoebox, but it was mine. I worked late nights as a junior designer at an agency, surviving on frozen dinners and terrible coffee that I made at home because I couldn't afford the cafe kind. But I was building something. Slowly, I moved my way up. I learned. I worked harder. By the time I was 25, I had landed a position as a UX designer at a fintech company downtown. It wasn't a fortune, but I wasn't rich. I wasn't struggling either. I paid my bills. I paid my student loans. I went to the gym when I could. And I loved that feeling of unlocking my own front door and knowing that everything inside I had earned. Then my dad called me one evening. His voice sounded different, tired. He told me his back was getting worse from years of driving delivery trucks. The pain was becoming unbearable. My mom, who works as a receptionist at a dental clinic, had her hours cut drastically. They were falling behind on bills. The mortgage payments were becoming a problem. And my sister, she had moved back home and set up this whole operation in the basement, talking constantly about building her personal brand, saying she couldn't possibly handle a 9-to-5 job right now because it would crush her creative spirit. My dad said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Sophia, just for a few months. We need you. Just for a few months." So I did it. I gave up my apartment. I packed up most of my belongings and put them in storage. I moved back into my childhood bedroom in Denver, and I told myself it was temporary. I was helping. This was what family did. From the very first month, I was the one writing the biggest checks, $1,300 a month toward the mortgage and utilities. I bought most of the groceries on my credit card, $300 shopping trips that added up. When the air conditioning died in the brutal heat of July, I paid for the repairs. When a pipe burst in the freezing winter and flooded part of the basement, I paid for that too. A new water heater, plumbing costs, everything. Over 18 months, I put down more than $30,000 into a house that didn't even have my name on the deed. My sister would hand over a few $100s here and there whenever she felt like it, usually after my mom asked her 3 times. The rest of her time was spent filming content, day-in-my-life videos, morning routines, outfit transitions, all in the house that I was quietly keeping afloat while she built her platform for people who would eventually turn against her. But the part that really hurt, the part that twisted the knife deepest, was how my parents talked about me when they thought I wasn't listening. To my face, they said they were grateful. They'd say things like, "We don't know what we'd do without you, Sophia." And they'd touch my shoulder, and I'd feel like I was actually helping, like I was being a good daughter. To their friends, to our relatives, to people at church, they told a completely different story. They said I had moved back because I couldn't handle adult life in the city. They said I was struggling. They said they were generously letting me stay so I could figure out how to be a functioning adult. My mom loved calling me her boomerang child in that tone that made everyone laugh like it was a cute little family joke. My dad would make comments to his friends about how at least one of his daughters still needed him, still depended on him. They never mentioned the checks I was signing. They never told anyone that I was paying more than either of them every single month. They rewrote the narrative, and I lived in both stories simultaneously. 3 months before that awful video was filmed, I finally told them I was leaving again. I'd found a small studio apartment in Denver, very close to my office. I promised them I would help, that we could sit down together and create a real budget. I showed them exactly how much my sister could contribute if she got a full-time job instead of waiting around for brand deals that would probably never come. I was trying to help them plan for a future where they'd be okay. The conversation shifted from quiet to absolutely explosive in about 10 seconds. They called me selfish. They accused me of abandoning them in what they were calling their hardest season. They said real family sacrifices. Real daughters don't walk away when things get uncomfortable. My mom's voice rose. My dad's face turned red. I felt like I was being torn apart right there in our kitchen. But I moved anyway. I signed the lease. I carried my boxes up the stairs to my new apartment. I started sleeping in my own space again, and I felt like I could finally breathe. A month after I moved out, while most of my friends still thought I lived in Denver with my parents, my family did something truly astounding. They took out some of the boxes I'd left in their garage, boxes I'd been meaning to pick up. They set up a little performance in the driveway. They filmed themselves staging a fake eviction, pretending to throw me out onto the street as punishment for being an ungrateful daughter. That's the version of me that the world saw online, the lazy daughter finally getting what she deserved. The version they never mentioned was the one who kept their lights on, the one who kept food in their refrigerator, the one whose paychecks were the only thing between them and drowning. The night I saw that video for the first time, I didn't comment. I didn't send angry text messages. I didn't call them screaming. I sat in my studio apartment with my laptop open and my phone on the table in front of me, and I made a choice, a very different kind of choice. If my family wanted to turn my life into content for strangers, then I was going to treat it like what it actually was, not a fight, not an argument, a case. I started by pulling up my banking application and scrolling back through 18 months of transactions. Every transfer I labeled as rent or mortgage, every payment to my parents, every utility bill I'd paid from my own account, every grocery run, $300 at a time, clearing my card over and over again. I exported PDFs, I downloaded statements, I highlighted every single line item with their names on it. I dug up the emails from the bank confirming I'd paid for the air conditioning repair. I found the invoice from the plumber when the pipe burst. I located the receipt for the new water heater that I'd put on my credit card because my dad's was already maxed out. Then I opened the folder with my lease for my studio apartment in Denver, the emails confirming my move-in date, the photos I'd sent my friends on the day I picked up my keys, the empty apartment waiting for me, dated weeks before my parents and sister filmed their little scene in the driveway. I went back to Instagram and I saved my sister's stories from over the past year. Every moment where she bragged about living at home rent-free, every shopping haul, every caption about how she was focusing on growing her platform instead of working some soul-crushing office job. I screen recorded it all. I went through my mom's Facebook posts and saved the ones where she called me her boomerang kid, where she hinted that I couldn't handle city life. Every time they had rewritten me as a burden, as a failure, as a joke, I saved it. By Monday, I had a folder on my desktop labeled simply Home. On Tuesday, I took a long lunch break from work and I drove to a law office in downtown Denver. A coworker had recommended them after her cousin went through a messy business dispute. I sat down across from a woman in a navy blazer. My hands were actually shaking a little. I turned my laptop around and I played the Instagram reel for her. I watched her eyebrows shoot up when my sister called me a freeloader on camera. I heard this small sound she made, kind of a gasp, when I clicked over to the folder with all my payments. She read through the transfers, the invoices, the lease with the date clearly marked, the screenshots of my parents' and sister's posts. She looked at me very calmly and said something that made me want to cry with relief. She said, "What they did wasn't just cruel, it was potentially defamatory. And the fact that you had already moved out when they filmed this video makes their entire story objectively false." She talked about defamation. She talked about intentional infliction of emotional distress. She talked about reputational damage in my professional field. If someone from my company saw that reel without context, it could affect how people saw me, how they trusted me. For the first time since moving back home, someone was actually naming what had been happening to me. Someone was saying it was wrong and it wasn't my fault. Before I left that office, we drafted the first documents to file a lawsuit. That night, when I got home, I took one more step. I wrote a short, polite email. I sent it to my dad's company's HR department. I sent one to the 2 small brands that my sister had tagged in her content and been trying to build partnerships with. I didn't rant. I didn't threaten anyone. I just attached the video. I attached a simple timeline of when I actually moved out, and I attached a couple of those bank statements. I simply told them that if they had seen that video and wondered who I was, this was the missing context. This was the truth they hadn't been told. Then I closed my laptop, turned my phone face down, and I waited for the work week to start. The papers went out on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk fixing the user flow on a checkout screen when my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. First, my mom, calling 3 times in a row, then my dad, then my sister, then the family group chat that had been quiet for weeks suddenly exploded with messages in all caps and question marks. I ignored the calls and watched the previews roll in on my notification screen. My mom started with something like, "How could you do this to your family?" Her voice was shaken. But then it shifted into, "I thought you loved us. I thought you cared about this family." And then it became desperate. "I'm having a panic attack. Please pick up the phone. Please talk to me." My dad sent one long paragraph about how this was a joke that had been taken too far. He said they were just trying to make light of a difficult situation. He called the lawsuit a tantrum. He said real adults handle things privately, which made me want to laugh because apparently real adults also stage fake evictions for internet points. But I didn't respond. Not yet. My sister skipped straight to insults. She called me vindictive. She called me dramatic. She said I was trying to destroy her entire career over one video. She said everyone knew I was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke. In between the messages were screenshots of the emails I'd sent to their places of work. Her texts were furious. "How dare you drag our jobs into this?" My dad wrote, "You are messing with our livelihood." My mom asked if I wanted her to lose her job after everything she had sacrificed for me. My sister wrote that brands were already contacting her asking if she was in legal trouble, asking if they needed to pause their collaborations with her. For hours, my phone did not stop buzzing. I put it face down. I finished my work tasks. I answered not a single call. That night, standing at my kitchen counter with a frozen dinner and my laptop open, I watched the first cracks appear in their world. My sister's Instagram story, usually a constant stream of coffee cups and outfit transitions, went dark. My mom posted a vague status about being betrayed by the people you raise. My dad, who had been proudly sharing the eviction video with his friends, quietly unshared it from his profile. By the weekend, things were unraveling. My mom texted that people at her clinic had seen the video. She said coworkers had pulled her aside and asked, "Is everything okay at home?" Not in a supportive way, in a "we saw you publicly humiliate your daughter" kind of way. She was embarrassed. Good. My dad said his supervisor had called him into the office and asked him to explain why he was in a viral video throwing his daughter's belongings into the street and talking about cutting her off. He said his manager looked at him differently after that. My sister said a client had canceled a freelance project, saying they didn't want to be associated with family drama. Not one of them apologized. Every message, every voicemail circled back to the same script. "We were just trying to teach you a lesson. We didn't think anyone important would see it. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're hurting us more than that video ever hurt you." Hearing it all laid out like that, hearing them measure harm only by how much it bounced back on them, it only made me more certain that I had done exactly the right thing. I didn't need them to suddenly understand. I needed them to live with the story they had written, but this time with all the missing pages glued back in. It took me 3 days to pick up when my mom called. By then, the initial wave of anger had slowed down into these long, guilt-soaked voicemails. When I finally answered, she started crying before I could even say hello. She was weeping on the other end of the line, and part of me wanted to hang up, but I stayed. She told me that she had only agreed to record the video because she was embarrassed, not about what they had done to me, embarrassed about me moving out. She told her friends at church, she told people in her social circles. She said I had moved back because city life was too hard, because I was lost, because they were helping me get back on track. When I moved out again, those same people started asking uncomfortable questions. Questions like, why did she let Sophia leave when they're struggling so much? Why doesn't the other daughter have a real job? My mom said the video was supposed to show that they were strong parents setting boundaries, that they were taking control, that they weren't just sitting back letting their grown daughter walk all over them. It was about saving face in front of people who were already gossiping about them. My dad got on the phone and added his version. He said the video was a way to make light of a hard situation. He said they wanted to turn their stress into something productive, maybe even grow a platform that could bring in extra money. He said my sister had convinced them it was a good idea, that people loved family content, that it would make other parents feel seen and less alone. Then my sister's voice cut in on the speakerphone, and she dropped the honesty my parents were dancing around. She said straight out that the video was good content. It was emotional, it was dramatic, it was exactly the kind of thing that goes viral. She said she had been stuck under 10,000 followers for months, and this pushed her over 30,000. She said brands were finally noticing her. She said, and I'm not making this up, and you're ruining everything because you can't handle your image being anything less than perfect. Listening to them, all three of them twist this into my problem, twist it into something about my vanity and my inability to laugh at myself. Something in me finally snapped in a different way. I told them very calmly that I had the receipts, I had the payments, I had the lease, and I was not backing down. My mom threatened to tell the whole family I was trying to destroy them. I told her she could tell whoever she wanted, because someone else was about to beat her to it. My aunt called me the next night. She had actually seen the video weeks before. She had thought it was cruel, but she stayed out of it. She minded her own business. But then my mom called her, sobbing about the lawsuit. And for the first time, my aunt heard the actual numbers. How much I had been paying, how long I had been home, how the video was filmed after I had already moved out into my own place. My aunt has never been good at keeping her opinions to herself. She told me she believed me. She said she had always suspected there was more to the story. She said she was tired of watching my mom play the victim whenever anyone challenged her version of events. By the end of the call, my aunt had offered to be a character witness for any lawyer who needed one. She had already started sending voice notes to cousins and siblings in our family group chat, laying out the real timeline, the actual facts, not the story my family had been telling. Overnight, the chat split into factions. Some people sent emojis and stayed quiet. Others messaged me privately, saying they were sorry they had liked the video when they thought it was real. They apologized for judging me without knowing the full story. My uncle, who always tries to be the peacekeeper, convinced my dad that we should all meet somewhere neutral and try to talk like adults. That's how I ended up sitting on a bench in a park downtown, watching my parents walk toward me with my uncle trailing behind them like a referee. The conversation went exactly how you'd expect. My dad said I was making them look crazy. I pointed out that they had cruised themselves acting crazy with no help from me whatsoever. My mom said no one would have cared if I had just laughed it off. I asked her if she would laugh off being called a freeloader to 500,000 strangers online, if she would smile and move on while her reputation was being torn apart by people she'd never met. My uncle tried the whole "there have been mistakes on both sides" routine. He said family should forgive. He said lawsuits were extreme. I told him something I'll never forget saying myself. I said, forgiveness and accountability are not the same thing. I can forgive them and still hold them responsible for what they did. While all of that was happening in real life, the internet was doing its own thing. My sister's account came back from a short suspension with a warning for harassment and bullying. A couple of the brands she had been so desperate to work with quietly untagged themselves from the reel. They removed her from their pages. They didn't want to be associated with someone who would publicly humiliate her own sister for views. And at my job, where I had been absolutely dreading sideways looks and whispered conversations, something unexpected happened. My manager called me into a conference room, closed the door, and said he had seen the video. He said he had also received my email with all the context. He told me that HR had flagged it in case it turned into workplace harassment, but that as far as the company was concerned, I had done nothing wrong. He asked if I felt safe. He asked if I needed time off. He asked if they wanted them to block certain numbers from calling the front desk. For the first time in weeks, I felt like an adult in a room full of adults, not a child on trial in my own family, not someone who deserved what had happened to her. My parents hated that. They were used to being the ones who controlled the story. Now, between my aunt, my coworkers, and the brands my sister wanted so badly, other people were finally seeing the whole picture. A few days after that park meeting, my dad showed up at my office building on his lunch break. He was holding this worn folder like it was evidence in his own case. He texted and said he was downstairs, said it was urgent. So I met him outside, where the delivery trucks lined the alley, and my stomach was already in knots. He opened the folder right there on the sidewalk. Inside were past due notices on the house, letters from the bank about being behind on the mortgage, credit card statements with balances that made my stomach flip completely, medical bills from when his back injury had been at its absolute worst. He spread them out like a fan in front of me and said, "This is what you're doing to us." He told me they were 2 payments behind on the house. His hours had been cut again at work. The credit cards were maxed from groceries and gas, and he admitted quietly some of the equipment my sister had needed for her content creation. He said, when you were living at home and sending $1,300 every month, it was the difference between us treading water and us going under. Now we're sinking. He didn't mention my sister's contributions, so I asked him directly. He shrugged and said she paid what she could. He said she was still building her brand. He said it would pay off eventually. Then he looked at me like I was supposed to fill the silence with an offer, like I was supposed to say, "Yes, I'll come back." He said, if you would just come back for a year, or at least send what you were sending before, we could catch up. He said we could forget the video, pretend it never happened. I told him I was sorry they were in trouble, but I was not moving back in, and I was absolutely not going to become their unpaid safety net again. I told him there were other options, selling one of the cars, cutting the cable subscription, telling my sister she needed a full-time job instead of waiting for a sponsorship that would probably never come. He snapped.
He said I sounded just like those people online who tell poor folks to stop buying coffee. He said I had no idea how hard it was to be in his position. Then he folded the papers back into their folder and walked away without saying goodbye. That same night, my sister posted another reel. This time, it wasn't a glossy production. It was shaky video of a nearly empty refrigerator, a stack of unpaid envelopes on the kitchen table. She talked about how her wealthy designer sister was punishing her parents, how they're months behind in bills because I had pulled my support, how some people care more about their public image than their own family. For a few hours, the comments were full of sympathy. Then someone linked the old reel. Someone else posted screenshots from her page with all the bar nights, the shopping trips, the new camera she had bragged about buying on credit. People started asking where all that money was going, if she was really that helpless, why she had filmed herself humiliating me if she was struggling so much. She turned off replies. A week later, the post was deleted entirely. My parents and sister tried one more tactic. They drove into the city without telling me. They came to my building in Denver and asked the front desk to call me down. The concierge rang my apartment and said there were two women in the lobby who said they were family and needed to see me immediately. I told him I didn't feel safe meeting them. I asked him not to let them upstairs. While they were arguing with him about it, my aunt pulled into the loading zone like some kind of chaotic guardian angel. She had heard they were coming because my mom had called her, asking her to talk sense into me. Instead, my aunt walked into the lobby, stepped between them and the desk, and told her they were harassing me. She reminded my mom, out loud and in front of a stranger, that they had filmed a fake eviction for likes, that now they were mad there were consequences. The concierge asked all three of them to leave. The situation de-escalated. My aunt texted me later that they had driven off in tense silence. In the middle of all this, my lawyer called with an update. The judge had denied their motion to get the case thrown out. We were moving into discovery. Every bank statement, every text message, every email about money or me would be fair game. My parents would have to turn over everything. My parents complained that lawyers were too expensive, that they were drowning in fees. And I thought about all the times they had heard me say to me, "You made your bed, now lie in it." I wondered if they finally understood what that actually meant. By the time discovery really got underway, my parents looked like they had aged 10 years. Their lawyer had gone through months of their personal messages about me, the jokes about me being an ATM, the texts where they discussed using this situation for content, the exact thread where they planned the eviction video weeks after I had already moved out into my own place. One afternoon, my attorney called and said their side wanted to talk settlement again. This time, it sounded serious. A few days later, we sat across from each other in a bland conference room with buzzing fluorescent lights and a pot of coffee that probably had been sitting there since the morning. Their lawyer did most of the talking at first, sliding a printed document across the table. The offer was this: they would permanently remove anything online that showed me as a freeloader. They would post a public apology admitting the video was staged and that I had been supporting the house financially. And they would pay me $10,000 over time as part of the settlement. My dad stared at the table the whole time, hands folded like he was in church. My mom kept glancing between me and the lawyer, eyes red but dry like she had run out of tears. My sister sat in the corner of the room, arms crossed, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping in her face. When it was my turn to speak, I told them very plainly that $10,000 did not impress me. Over the last couple of years, I had poured 3 times that into their mortgage and bills without a contract, without any security, just because they asked me to. No settlement check was going to make that disappear.
What I cared about, I told them, was the part they obviously hoped would be quiet: the public apology, in their own names, where they said clearly that they had lied about me. I wanted them to write that the story in the video was false, that I was not a freeloader, that I had been paying the majority of the household expenses, that they understood what they did hurt me and damaged my reputation. Their lawyer shifted in his chair and tried to soften the language. He suggested words like misrepresented instead of lied, misunderstanding instead of false story. I said no, no softening, no legal speak. If we were going to end this without going in front of a judge, they needed to be honest for once, not just careful, not just strategic, honest. There was a long silence.
My mom finally said in this small voice that she didn't want everyone thinking she was a bad mother. I told her she should have thought about that before she performed being a good mother for the internet while trashing me in the comments section. My dad said this felt like public humiliation. I reminded him that I had been publicly humiliated first, by him, by all of them. My sister muttered that this was going to kill her brand if anyone screenshotted it. My lawyer looked at me and I nodded. This was the line. This was the boundary. And I wasn't moving. A month after that settlement meeting, the rest of the dominoes fell. The bank finally moved forward on the house in Denver. There had been too many missed payments and not enough money to catch up. My parents packed up the place they had lived in for over 20 years, the place they had been so proud to film in, and they moved into a small, tired-looking apartment across town. No front porch, no yard, thin walls where you could hear the neighbor's TV through the bedroom. My dad's hours at the delivery company never fully recovered after the attention from the video and all the time he took off for meetings. Eventually, he picked up shifts at a distribution warehouse on the edge of the city. He comes home sore and quiet now. My mom's hours at the clinic never went back to normal either. She ended up taking a full-time cashier job at a big box store. She went from talking about patients in offices to talking about price checks and rude customers. My sister's Instagram didn't explode the way she had imagined. It imploded. After enough reports and flagged content, her main account disappeared one morning. Her profile photo, her reels, her follower count, all gone. She tried to start another page, but the algorithm didn't love her the way she had hoped. People recognized her and called her out immediately. She got a job as a barista in the city, working early mornings and weekends, sharing a cramped walk-up apartment with 2 roommates and a cat that wasn't even hers. The girl who had laughed on camera about the freeloader being finally gone was now splitting rent and scrubbing syrup off coffee counters for a living. Then came the apology. It didn't come as a dramatic video. It didn't come as a long thread. It was a paragraph on my mom's Facebook page and a matching post on my dad's, written with help from their lawyer, but posted under their actual names. In it, they said the video of me being kicked out was staged, that I had already moved out when they filmed it, that the comments suggesting I was a freeloader were not true. They wrote that I had contributed significantly to household expenses while living at home. They wrote that they understood their actions had harmed my reputation and caused me pain. They apologized directly to me and to anyone who had been misled by their content. There was no dramatic performance, no tears, no background music, no trending hashtag. The posts didn't go viral. They got a couple dozen likes, some awkward heart emojis from older relatives, a few comments from neighbors and church ladies saying things like, "Glad you cleared this up," or "Family is complicated." But the people who needed to see it saw it. My aunt screenshotted it and sent it to me with a single message. About time. My boss saw it and closed the loop in his mind about who I actually am. The cousins who had quietly believed the worst about me, or at least wondered, now had the truth in writing. And most importantly, I saw it. I read it once slowly, letting each sentence sink in. Not because I thought the words magically fixed what happened, they didn't, but because for the first time in this entire mess, my parents had told the truth about me in public. They had admitted they were wrong. I screenshotted it, I forwarded it to my lawyer, I saved a copy in the same folder where I had kept the original reel and the bank statements, and then I muted both of their accounts. People sometimes ask if I forgave them, if things ever went back to how they were before. The honest answer is there's no version of before to go back to. Trust is not a light switch you can just flip back on. We see each other on holidays now in larger group settings. There are hugs that feel more like polite rituals than real affection. We talk about traffic, we talk about weather, we talk about my job in the most surface-level way possible. They don't bring up the video, I don't bring up the lawsuit. We keep everything hovering just above the real story, like we're all terrified if we look down we'll see the crater. I'm not angry every single day anymore. I'm not waking up and replaying that reel in my head anymore. But there is a part of me that is different now, harder in places that used to be soft. I'm careful about what I share, careful about who I let into my home, careful about how much access I give anyone, even people who share my last name. What I took from all of this wasn't just the satisfaction of watching their choices finally cost them something. It was a lesson I wish someone had taught me when I was younger, a lesson I hope you hear clearly. Family does not mean unlimited access to your life or your wallet. Love does not mean letting people weaponize your worst moments for strangers and then calling it a joke. Boundaries are not betrayal. Social media eats drama for breakfast and forgets it by dinner. But you are the one who has to live with the way you allowed yourself to be treated. Holding my parents and sister accountable didn't fix them, but it did something important for me. It reminded me that my story belongs to me, not to an algorithm, not to relatives who think views are worth more than respect. If you have ever watched someone you love turn you into content, into contempt, if you have ever been told to take a joke while your dignity gets traded for likes, you are allowed to draw a line so firm it shocks them. You are allowed to choose truth over image, peace over a version of family that only exists on camera. Sometimes choosing fairness, choosing yourself, is the first real act of love you have ever shown the person in the mirror. Tell me in the comments, and if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because this is what I learned. Your story belongs to you, and nobody, not your family, not the internet, not the people who claim to love you, gets to rewrite it without your permission. You get to decide how your story ends. You get to be the author of your own narrative. Thank you for listening to my story, for seeing me, for understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. I hope this reached you wherever you are, whatever city you're listening from. I hope it reminded you that you deserve better than to be anyone's content. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. You deserve a family, whether they're blood or chosen, that builds you up instead of tearing you down for views. Take care of yourselves out there.